Laws, Chapter 5. Laws concerning property.
Listen, all of you who have just heard the laws about gods and our ancestors, the soul is the most divine and truly personal possession a person has, second only to the gods. Within every person, there are two parts, the superior part that rules and the inferior part that serves. The ruling part should always be preferred over the subject part. Therefore, I am right in saying that everyone should honor their own soul, which seems to be honored by everyone but is not truly honored as it should be. Honor is a divine good, and nothing evil can be honorable. Anyone who thinks they can honor their soul through words, gifts, or any form of compliance without making it better is only pretending to honor it. For example, from a young age, every person believes they know everything and thinks they honor their soul by praising it, allowing it to do whatever it wants. But in doing so, they harm their soul and fail to truly honor it. In our opinion, the soul should be honored second only to the gods. Furthermore, when a person blames others and not themselves for the mistakes they have made and the great evils that have befallen them as a result, thinking they are exempt and innocent, they believe they are honoring their soul. But in reality, they are harming it. When a person indulges in pleasure, disregarding the word and approval of the legislator, they are far from honoring their soul. They only dishonor it and fill it with evil and remorse. Similarly, when a person does not endure the labors, fears, sorrows, and pains approved by the legislator, but gives in to them, they do not honor the soul. Instead, they make it dishonorable. And when a person believes that life at any cost is good, they do not honor their soul. Once again, they dishonor it. The soul, thinking that the world below is entirely evil, convinces the person to yield to this belief, rather than resisting and teaching the soul that the world of the gods below may be the greatest good. Moreover, when someone values beauty over virtue, they are truly dishonoring the soul. This preference implies that the body is more honorable than the soul, which is false. There is nothing of earthly origin that is more honorable than the heavenly. Those who think otherwise do not understand the true value of this remarkable possession. Similarly, when a person is willing or unwilling to acquire dishonest gains, they do not honor their soul with gifts. On the contrary, they trade its glory and honor for a small piece of gold. However, all the gold in the world is not enough to exchange for virtue. In short, anyone who does not evaluate the base and evil, the good and noble, according to the standards set by the legislator, and does not abstain from the former and practice the latter to the best of their ability, is shamefully and disgracefully abusing their soul, which is the most divine part of a person. They fail to realize that the greatest punishment for wrongdoing is to become like bad people, to avoid the company of the good, and to be cut off from them, instead joining and imitating the company of the bad. Those who associate with the bad must do and endure what such people naturally do and say to each other. This suffering is not justice but retribution. Justice and the just are noble, while retribution is the suffering that accompanies injustice. Whether a person escapes or endures this suffering, they are miserable. In the former case, they are not cured, and in the latter, they perish so that the rest of humanity may be saved. In general, our glory lies in following the better and improving the inferior, which is capable of improvement to the extent possible. Among all human possessions, the soul is naturally inclined to avoid evil and seek out and find the greatest good. Once a person has found it, they should dwell with it for the rest of their life. Therefore, the soul is second in honor, next to God. The honor of the body comes third, as everyone can understand. Having established this, we must now consider that there is a natural honor of the body, and within honors, some are true while others are counterfeit. It is the legislator's task to determine which is which. I suspect that the legislator would suggest the following: honor should not be given to a beautiful body, a strong body, a swift body, a tall body, or a healthy body, although many may think otherwise, any more than their opposites. The moderate states of all these qualities are by far the safest and most balanced. The extreme of any of these qualities makes the soul boastful and arrogant or mean-spirited and base. Money, property, and distinction all follow the same pattern. The excess of any of these things tends to create hatred and divisions among states and individuals, while the lack of them often leads to slavery. Therefore, I do not believe it is wise for someone to accumulate wealth solely for the purpose of leaving a large inheritance for their children. Great wealth is of no real benefit to them or to society. The best and most harmonious state for young people is one where they are free from flattery and have their basic needs met. This state aligns with our nature and allows for a life free from sorrow. Instead of leaving a heap of riches, parents should pass on the spirit of reverence to their children. We may think that they will inherit reverence from us if we scold them when they lack it. However, this quality is not truly imparted through our current style of admonition, which simply tells them that the young should always be reverential. A wise legislator should instead encourage the elders to show reverence to the younger generation. Above all, they should ensure that no young person witnesses or hears an elder doing or saying anything disgraceful. If the older generation lacks shame, the younger generation will certainly lack reverence. The best way to train the young is to train oneself at the same time. Rather than admonishing them, one should consistently practice what they preach. Those who honor their relatives and show reverence to those who share the same gods and bloodline can expect the gods who preside over generation to favor them and bless their descendants. Those who value the services their friends and acquaintances provide more than the friends themselves, and consider their own favors to be less significant than those they receive, will have the goodwill of others in their interactions. In their relationship with the state and fellow citizens, the best person is one who desires to win the prize of obedience to the laws of their country more than any victory in peace or war, including the Olympic Games. They should be known as the person who has best obeyed the laws throughout their life. In their dealings with strangers, one should consider contracts to be sacred and recognize that the concerns and wrongs of strangers are more dependent on the protection of God than wrongs done to citizens. Strangers, having no family or friends, deserve more pity from both gods and men. Therefore, those who are most capable of avenging them are the most zealous in their cause. The genius and god of the stranger, who follows in the train of Zeus, the god of strangers, is the one who is most able to help them. Therefore, those who are cautious will strive to live their lives without wronging strangers. Among all offenses, the greatest is to wrong a suppliant. The god who witnessed the agreement made with the suppliant becomes their special guardian, and they will not go unavenged. We have now described how one should act towards their parents, themselves, and their own affairs, as well as in relation to the state, friends, and relatives, both with regards to their own countrymen and strangers. Now, let us consider the qualities a person must possess to navigate through life in matters of praise and blame, which are not governed by laws, but shape a person's character and make them more amenable to the laws that will be imposed. Truth is the foundation of all good things, for both gods and men. If one wishes to be blessed and happy, they should embrace the truth from the beginning and strive to live as a truthful person for as long as possible. A truthful person can be trusted, while someone who willingly tells lies cannot be trusted, and a fool is one who unknowingly spreads falsehoods. Neither condition is desirable, as the untrustworthy and ignorant person has no friends. As time goes on, their true nature becomes known, and they find themselves isolated in old age. Whether their children or friends are alive or not, they are equally lonely. A person who does not commit injustice is worthy of honor, and someone who not only refrains from injustice themselves but also prevents others from committing it is deserving of even greater honor. The latter person is worth more than one individual, as they inform the rulers about the injustices of others. Even more highly esteemed is someone who cooperates with the rulers in correcting the citizens to the best of their ability. They shall be recognized as the exemplary citizen and be praised for their virtue. The same praise can be given for temperance, wisdom, and all other virtues that can be shared with others as well as acquired for oneself. Those who share these virtues should be honored as the best of the best, while those who are willing but unable to acquire them may be given the second place. However, those who are jealous and unwilling to allow others to partake in any good in a friendly manner deserve blame. We should not undervalue the good possessed by such individuals, but rather strive to acquire it ourselves to the best of our ability. Let every person freely strive for the prize of virtue, and let there be no envy. For envy only diminishes the greatness of societies. The envious person competes in a race, tarnishing the reputation of others. However, the envious person, who believes that defaming others will give them an advantage, is less committed to the pursuit of true virtue and unjustly slanders their rivals, causing them to lose hope. This undermines the entire city's cultivation of virtue and diminishes its glory. Every person should be courageous, but they should also be kind. When someone experiences cruel or unjust acts of injustice from others, they can only escape by fighting back, defending themselves, and conquering. They must never stop punishing those who wronged them. Only a person with a noble spirit can accomplish this. As for those who commit evil but can be reformed, we must remember that the unjust person does not choose to be unjust willingly. No one willingly chooses to possess the greatest of evils, especially in the most honorable part of themselves, which is the soul. Therefore, no one would willingly admit or allow the greatest evil to continue in their soul. We should always pity and forgive those who are capable of reforming themselves. We should refrain from anger and resentment, not harboring ill feelings like a woman. However, we should pour out our wrath upon those who are incapable of reform and completely evil. Therefore, I say that good people should be both gentle and passionate when necessary. The greatest evil, which is inherent in the souls of most people, is excessive self-love. This self-love blinds people and causes them to judge wrongly when it comes to justice, goodness, and honor. They always think they should prioritize themselves over the truth. However, a truly great person should prioritize what is just, whether it is their own actions or the actions of others, rather than themselves or their own interests. Similarly, people are led to believe that their own ignorance is wisdom. Because they refuse to let others act on their behalf in matters they do not understand, they end up acting improperly themselves. Therefore, everyone should avoid excessive self-love and be willing to follow someone better than themselves, without letting false shame get in the way. There are also other important principles that should be frequently remembered and reminded of. Just as a stream needs water flowing in as it flows out, wisdom needs recollection. Therefore, a person should refrain from excessive laughter or tears and encourage others to do the same. They should moderate their extreme sorrow or joy and strive to behave appropriately, whether they are experiencing good fortune or facing challenges. They should always hope that any future afflictions will be lessened by God for good people and that present evils will be transformed into something better. They should also have faith that the opposite of these evils, which are good things, will be added to their lives and that they will be fortunate. These should be people's hopes, and they should remind themselves and others of these things on every occasion, both in jest and in earnest. Enough has been said about divine matters, including the practices that people should follow and the qualities they should possess. Now, let us turn our attention to human matters, as we are speaking to humans and not to gods. Pleasures, pains, and desires are all part of human nature, and every mortal being must inevitably depend on them with great interest. Therefore, we must praise the noblest life, not only because it appears to be the most beautiful, but also because if a person tastes it and does not abandon it for another while still young, they will find that it surpasses other lives in the very thing that we all desire, a greater amount of pleasure and less pain throughout life. This will become evident when a person truly experiences it. But what does it mean to have a true taste? We must learn this from the argument, which revolves around what is natural and what is not. We must compare one life to another, comparing the more pleasurable to the more painful. We desire pleasure but not pain. We are willing to accept a neutral state in exchange, not for pleasure but for pain. We also wish for less pain and more pleasure, but we do not wish for less pleasure and more pain. We cannot assert that we would desire an equal balance of either. And all these things differ or do not differ in terms of number, size, intensity, and equality, and in their opposites when considered as objects of desire in relation to our wants. This is the necessary order of things. We desire a life in which there are many great and intense pleasures and pains, and in which the pleasures outweigh the pains. We do not desire a life in which the opposite is true, where the pains exceed the pleasures. Nor do we desire a life in which the pleasures and pains are small, few, and weak, and the pains exceed the pleasures. When there is a balance of pleasure and pain in life, we consider it a balanced life. We prefer other lives because they exceed in what we like, or we reject them because they exceed in what we dislike. All lives can be categorized into these types, and we must also consider what kind of lives we naturally desire. If we desire any other lives, it is only due to ignorance and lack of experience of the lives that actually exist. Now, what are these lives, and how many are there in which, after examining and understanding the objects of our desires and their opposites, we can choose the dear, pleasant, best, and noblest things to live the happiest life possible? Let's say that the temperate life is one type of life, the rational life is another, the courageous life is another, and the healthy life is another. Let's oppose these four lives to four other lives: the foolish life, the cowardly life, the intemperate life, and the diseased life. Someone who knows the temperate life will describe it as gentle in all things, with gentle pains and pleasures, and desires and loves that are not insane. On the other hand, the intemperate life is impulsive in all things, with intense pains and pleasures, and desires and loves that are completely insane. In the temperate life, pleasures exceed pains, but in the intemperate life, pains exceed pleasures in terms of magnitude, number, and frequency. Therefore, one of these lives is naturally and necessarily more pleasant, and the other is more painful. Someone who wants to live pleasantly cannot choose to live intemperately. If this is true, then it is clear that no one willingly chooses to be intemperate. Instead, the majority of people lack temperance in their lives due to ignorance or lack of self-control, or both. The same applies to the diseased and healthy life. Both have pleasures and pains, but in health, pleasure exceeds pain, and in sickness, pain exceeds pleasure. Our intention in choosing lives is not for pain to exceed pleasure. We have determined that the life in which pleasure exceeds pain is the more pleasant life. We can say that the temperate life has fewer and smaller elements of pleasure and pain compared to the intemperate life, and the wise life has fewer and smaller elements compared to the foolish life, and the courageous life has fewer and smaller elements compared to the cowardly life. In each pair, one exceeds in pleasure and the other in pain, with the courageous surpassing the cowardly and the wise surpassing the foolish. Therefore, one class of lives exceeds the other class in pleasure. The temperate, courageous, wise, and healthy lives exceed the cowardly, foolish, intemperate, and diseased lives. Generally speaking, a life with any virtue, whether of the body or soul, is more pleasant than a vicious life. It is also superior in beauty, righteousness, excellence, and reputation. Living according to such a life makes a person infinitely happier than living the opposite way. Enough of the introduction. Now let's move on to the laws, or more accurately, an outline of them. Just as in the case of a fabric or any other material, the warp and the weft cannot be made of the same materials, with the warp being stronger and firmer, and the weft being softer and more elastic. Similarly, those who are to hold important positions in states should be truly distinguished from those who have had limited education. Let's assume that there are two parts to the constitution of a state, the creation of offices and the laws that govern them. But before all of this, we must consider the following. A shepherd or herdsman or horse breeder, when they receive their animals, will not begin to train them until they have first purified them in a way that is appropriate for a community of animals. They will separate the healthy and unhealthy, the good breed and the bad breed, and send away the unhealthy and poorly bred ones to other herds. They will tend to the rest, knowing that their efforts will be in vain and have no effect on the souls or bodies of those who have been corrupted by nature and poor upbringing. If they neglect to purify them, these animals will bring destruction to the pure and healthy nature and existence of every other animal. The case of other animals is not as important, as they are only used for illustration purposes. However, what pertains to humans is of the utmost importance. The legislator should inquire and determine what is necessary for each individual in terms of purification and any other procedures. For example, consider the purification of a city. There are many types of purification, some easier and others more difficult. The best and most difficult purifications can be achieved by a legislator who is also a despot. But a legislator who is not a despot and who establishes a new government and laws may consider himself fortunate if he can even accomplish the mildest form of purification. The most effective form of purification is painful, similar to medical treatments that involve just punishment and, as a last resort, death or exile. This is how we typically deal with incurable great sinners who pose the greatest harm to the entire state. However, a milder form of purification is as follows: when individuals who have nothing and are in need of food show a willingness to follow their leaders in attacking the property of the wealthy, these individuals, who are a natural plague on the state, are sent away by the legislator in a friendly manner as far as possible. This dismissal is euphemistically referred to as a colony. Every legislator should strive to do this immediately. In our current situation, however, there is no need to establish a colony or implement a purification separation. Instead, we should focus on ensuring that the various streams of people coming together from different sources, whether springs or mountain torrents, into a single community, are clear and free from impurities. This may require effort and caution in every political arrangement, as there may be trouble and danger. However, since we are only discussing and not taking action at the moment, let us assume that our selection process is complete and the desired purity has been achieved. Regarding evil individuals who wish to join and become citizens of our state, after testing them through various means of persuasion for a sufficient amount of time, we will prevent them from entering. On the other hand, we will warmly welcome good individuals as friends to the best of our ability. We must also acknowledge another stroke of good fortune that both the Heraclid colony and we have experienced. We have avoided land division and the abolition of debts. These issues always lead to dangerous conflicts, and a city that is forced by necessity to legislate on such matters cannot maintain the old ways nor dare to change them. Instead, we must rely on prayers and hope for gradual and cautious change over time. This change can be achieved by those who have an abundance of land and debtors, and who are willing to share with those in need, sometimes forgiving and sometimes giving, while maintaining moderation and understanding that poverty is an increase in desires rather than a decrease in property. This is the crucial first step towards the salvation of a state, upon which a lasting political order can be established according to the circumstances. However, if the change is based on an unsound principle, the future administration of the country will be filled with difficulties. Fortunately, we have escaped this danger, but let us consider how we might have escaped if we hadn't, and we can now assert that there is no other way to escape, whether narrow or broad, except through freedom from greed and a sense of justice. Our city shall be built upon this foundation, as there should be no disputes among citizens regarding property. If there are long-standing quarrels among them, no sensible legislator will proceed with the organization of the state until those disputes are settled. It would be superhuman folly and wickedness for those who have been given the opportunity by God, as we have, to found a new state free from enmity, to create enmities among themselves through the distribution of land and houses. So, how can we properly distribute the land? Firstly, we must determine the number of citizens and the number and size of the divisions they will be formed into. Then, we can fairly apportion the land and houses. The number of citizens can only be estimated in relation to the territory and neighboring states. The territory must be sufficient to sustain a certain number of inhabitants in a moderate way of life. Anything more is unnecessary. The number of citizens should be enough to defend themselves against the injustices of their neighbors and to provide effective aid when their neighbors are wronged. After surveying our territory and that of our neighbors, we will establish the actual and theoretical boundaries. Now, let us proceed to legislate with the goal of perfecting the form and structure of our state. The number of citizens shall be 5,040, which is a convenient number. These citizens will be landowners and protectors of their allotted land. The houses and land will be divided in the same manner, so that each person corresponds to a lot. Let us first divide the whole number into 2 parts, then into 3. This number can also be divided into 4 or 5 parts, or any number of parts up to 10. Every legislator should have enough knowledge of arithmetic to determine the most useful number for all cities. We have chosen the number that contains the greatest, most regular, and unbroken series of divisions. The whole number has every possible division, and the number 5040 can be divided by exactly 59 divisors, with 10 of them ranging from 1 to 10. This will provide numbers for war and peace, as well as for all contracts and transactions, including taxes and land divisions. These principles of numbers should be determined by those who are obligated by law to understand them, as they are true and should be proclaimed at the founding of the city for practical purposes. Whether the legislator is establishing a new state or restoring an old and deteriorated one, in regards to gods and temples, the temples that will be built in each city and the gods or demigods they will be named after, if the legislator is wise, they will not make any changes to anything that has been sanctioned by the oracle of Delphi, Dodona, or the god Ammon, or any ancient tradition, whether through apparitions or reputed divine inspiration, which have led mankind to establish sacrifices connected to mystical rituals, whether originating from the location itself or derived from Tyrrhenia or Cyprus or some other place. Based on these traditions, they have consecrated oracles, images, altars, temples, and designated a sacred area for each of them. The legislator should not disturb even the smallest part of these traditions. Instead, they should assign a god, demigod, or hero to each district and, in the distribution of land, give them their chosen domain and everything appropriate. This way, the inhabitants of each district can gather at set times, easily fulfill their various needs, and come together for sacrifices, becoming friends and acquaintances. There is no greater good in a state than for its citizens to know one another. When there is darkness and ignorance of each other's characters, no one will receive the honor, power, or justice they deserve. Therefore, in every state, above all else, every person should be honest and sincere, without deceit, so that no deceitful person can take advantage of them. The next step in our legislative game, like removing a stone from the sacred line in the game of drafts, is an unusual one and may cause wonder when mentioned for the first time. However, if one reflects and carefully considers the matter, they will see that our city is ordered in a way that, if not the best, is the second best. Perhaps someone may not approve of this form because they believe it is ill-suited for a legislator who does not have absolute power. The truth is that there are three forms of government: the best, the second best, and the third best. We will briefly mention them and leave the choice to the ruler of the settlement. Following this method, let us discuss the states that are respectively first, second, and third in excellence, and then we will leave the choice to Cleinias or anyone else who may have to make a similar choice among constitutions in the future and desires to incorporate a feature that is congenial to them and that they approve of in their own country. The first and highest form of the state, government, and law is one in which the ancient saying, "Friends have all things in common," prevails most widely. Whether such a state exists now or will ever exist, where there is a communal sharing of women, children, and property, and where the private and individual is completely banished from life, and things that are naturally private, such as eyes, ears, and hands, are held in common, and in some way see, hear, and act together, and all people express praise, blame, joy, and sorrow on the same occasions, and whatever laws exist unite the city to the greatest extent, whether all this is possible or not. I say that no one, acting on any other principle, will ever establish a state that is truer, better, or more virtuous. Whether such a state is governed by gods or the children of gods, whether it is one ruler or multiple rulers, those who live in such a state are truly fortunate. Therefore, we should look to this as the model for the state and strive with all our might to create one that resembles it. The state we are currently working on, when created, will be closest to immortality and will be the only one that takes second place. After that, with the grace of God, we will complete the third one. Now, let the citizens immediately distribute their land and houses. They should not cultivate the land collectively, as a community of goods goes beyond their proposed origin, upbringing, and education. However, in making the distribution, each owner should recognize that their particular lot also belongs to the entire city. Since the earth is their parent, they should care for her more diligently than children care for their mother. She is a goddess and their queen, and they are her mortal subjects. They should also hold similar feelings towards the gods and demigods of the country. To ensure that the distribution remains intact, they should further consider that the current number of families should always be maintained, neither increased nor decreased. This can be achieved for the entire city in the following manner. When a lot owner passes away, they should leave their most beloved child, only one, as the heir to their dwelling and successor in the duty of serving the gods, the state, and the family, both the living members and those who have passed away. As for their other children, if they have more than one, they should give the females in marriage according to a future law to be enacted, and they should distribute the males as sons to citizens who have no children and are willing to receive them. If there are no such citizens, and certain individuals have too many or too few children, whether male or female, or if there is barrenness in all these cases, the highest and most honorable magistracy established by us should judge and determine what should be done with the surplus or deficiency, and devise a means to ensure that the number of 5,040 houses always remains the same. There are many ways to regulate population numbers. Those who are capable of reproducing can be encouraged to refrain from doing so, while efforts can be made to increase the number of births through incentives and penalties. Older individuals can also provide guidance and reprimand to the younger generation to achieve this goal. If there are difficulties in maintaining an equal number of households, and there is an excess of citizens due to their strong attachment to each other, a solution could be to establish a colony composed of suitable individuals who will maintain friendly relations with the original city. In the event of a significant decrease in population due to disease or war, it is not advisable to introduce citizens of questionable birth and education, if possible. However, it is said that even God cannot fight against necessity. Therefore, let us imagine that this high argument speaks to us as follows: honorable men, continue to value similarity, equality, sameness, and agreement in all aspects, including numbers and every good and noble quality. Above all, adhere to the number 5,040 throughout your lives. Secondly, do not diminish the value of the modest inheritances you received through buying and selling them to each other. By doing so, you will lose the favor of the God who bestowed these lots upon you, as well as the respect of the legislator. Disobeying this law will result in being unable to keep or receive a lot. Firstly, the earth is considered sacred to the gods, and secondly, priests and priestesses will offer prayers and sacrifices to punish those who buy or sell the houses or lands they have received. These prayers will be recorded on cypress wood tablets in temples for future generations to learn from. A watch will be kept over these matters, and the vigilant magistrates will ensure that any violations of these commands are discovered and punished as offenses against both the law and God. The immense benefits of such an ordinance for cities that obey and administer it cannot be understood by wicked individuals, as the old proverb says, but only by those with experience and good habits. In such a system, there will not be many opportunities for making money. No one should engage in ignoble occupations that bring shame to a free person, nor should they seek to acquire wealth through such means. Furthermore, the law prohibits private individuals from owning gold and silver, allowing only the use of coins for daily transactions, which are necessary when dealing with artisans and paying hired workers, whether they are slaves or immigrants. Therefore, our citizens should have a currency that is accepted among themselves, but not by the rest of the world. However, for expeditions, journeys to other lands, embassies, or any other occasion that requires sending a herald, the state must possess a common Hellenic currency. If a private citizen needs to travel abroad, they must obtain the consent of the magistrates. If they return with foreign currency, they must give the surplus back to the treasury and receive an equivalent amount in the local currency. If they are found to be keeping the foreign currency, it will be confiscated, and anyone who knows about it but fails to report it will be equally cursed and dishonored, and will also be fined an amount equal to the foreign currency that was brought back. In marriages, no dowries should be given or received. No one should deposit money with someone they do not trust as a friend, nor should they lend money with interest. Borrowers should not be obligated to repay either the principal or interest. These principles are the best, as anyone can see when comparing them to the fundamental principles and intentions of a state. The intention of a reasonable statesman, as we assert, is not what the majority believe to be the goal of a good legislator. The majority believes that the true purpose of legislation is to make the state as large and wealthy as possible, with vast amounts of gold and silver, and the greatest empire on land and sea. They imagine that this is the true objective of legislation, while also inconsistently adding that the true legislator desires to make the city the best and happiest possible. However, they fail to realize that some of these things are possible, while others are not. The one who governs the state will desire what is possible and will not indulge in vain wishes or attempts to achieve the impossible. A citizen can indeed be happy and virtuous, and the legislator will strive to make them so. However, it is impossible for them to be both very rich and very good at the same time, at least not in the way the majority understands wealth. When they refer to the rich, they mean those few individuals who possess the most valuable possessions, even if the owner is a dishonest person. And if this is true, I can never agree with the belief that a wealthy person will be happy. They must be both wealthy and good. And it is impossible for someone to be both extremely good and extremely wealthy at the same time. Someone may ask, why not? And we shall answer, because the acquisitions that come from both just and unjust sources are more than double those that come from just sources only, and the sums that are spent neither honorably nor disgracefully are only half as great as those that are spent honorably and on honorable purposes. So, if one person acquires double and spends half, the other person who is in the opposite situation and is a good person cannot possibly be wealthier than them. The first person I am referring to, the saver and not the spender, is not always bad. They may indeed be utterly bad in some cases, but, as I was saying, they are never a good person. Because someone who receives money both unjustly and justly, and spends neither unjustly nor justly, will be a wealthy person if they are also thrifty. On the other hand, the utterly bad person is generally profligate and therefore very poor, while the person who spends on noble things and acquires wealth only through just means can hardly be remarkable for riches, just as they can't be very poor. So, our statement is true, that the very wealthy are not good, and if they are not good, they are not happy. But the intention of our laws was for the citizens to be as happy as possible and as friendly as possible to one another. And people who are always in conflict with one another, and among whom many wrongs are committed, can never be friends to one another, but only those among whom crimes and lawsuits are few and minor. Therefore, we say that gold and silver should not be allowed in the city, nor should there be much of the common type of trade that involves lending money or raising lower quality livestock, only the products of agriculture, and only as much as will not cause us to neglect the things for the sake of which riches exist, I mean, the soul and body, which will never be worth anything without physical exercise and education. And therefore, as we have said not once but many times, the pursuit of riches should be the least of our concerns. Because there are three things that every person has an interest in, and the interest in money, when properly considered, is the third and lowest of them. In the middle comes the interest in the body, and first of all, the interest in the soul. And the state that we are describing will have been properly established if it assigns honors according to this scale. But if, in any of the laws that have been established, health has been prioritized over temperance, or wealth over health and temperate habits, then that law must clearly be wrong. Therefore, the legislator should often ask himself the question, what do I want, and do I achieve my goal, or do I miss the mark? In this way, and only in this way, can he fulfill his duty and free others from the task of legislation. So, let the LID hold their lot under the conditions that we have mentioned. It would be ideal for every person to come to the colony with all things equal, but since this is not possible and one person will have greater possessions than another, for many reasons and especially to maintain equality in special crises of the state, property qualifications must be unequal, so that offices, contributions, and distributions may be proportionate to the value of each person's wealth, and not solely to the virtue of their ancestors or themselves, nor to the strength and beauty of their person, but also to the extent of their wealth or poverty. And so, through a law of inequality that is proportionate to their wealth, they will receive honors and offices as equally as possible, and there will be no quarrels or disputes. To achieve this, there should be 4 different standards established based on the amount of property. There should be a first, second, third, and fourth class in which the citizens will be placed, and they will be called by these or similar names. They may remain in the same rank or move into another rank in individual cases, either becoming richer from being poorer or poorer from being richer. The form of law that I would propose as the natural continuation would be as follows: an estate that desires to be saved from the greatest of all plagues, not faction, but rather distraction. There should exist among the citizens neither extreme poverty nor excessive wealth, as both lead to these evils. Now the legislator should determine what the limit of poverty or wealth should be. Let the limit of poverty be the value of the lot. This should be preserved, and no ruler or anyone else who aspires to be virtuous will allow the lot to be diminished in any case. The legislator sets this as a measure, and they will allow a person to acquire double or triple, or even 4 times the amount of this. Compare Arist. Paul. But if a person has even greater riches, whether they have found them, received them as gifts, made them in business, or acquired them through any stroke of luck that exceeds the measure, if they give back the surplus to the state and to the gods who protect the state, they shall suffer no penalty or loss of reputation. But if they disobey this law, anyone who wishes may report them, and they will receive half the value of the excess, and the offender shall pay a sum equal to the excess from their own property, and the other half of the excess shall belong to the gods. And let every possession of every person, except for the lot, be publicly registered before the magistrates appointed by the law, so that all disputes about money may be easy and straightforward. The next thing to note is that the city should be placed as close to the center of the country as possible. We should choose a location that has the necessary qualities for a city, and this can be easily imagined and described. Then we will divide the city into 12 sections, first establishing temples for Hestia, Zeus, and Athena in a place we will call the Acropolis, and surrounding it with a circular wall. The division of the entire city and country will radiate from this point. The 12 sections will be equalized by making the ones with good land smaller and the ones with inferior land larger. There will be a total of 5,040 lots, each divided into 2 sections, with each allotment consisting of 2 such sections, one near the city and the other at a distance. This arrangement will be carried out as follows: the section near the city will be added to the one on the borders to form one lot, and the section next nearest will be added to the one next farthest, and so on for the rest. Furthermore, the same principle of equalizing the soil should be maintained in the 2 sections of the lots. The good and bad qualities of the land will be compensated for by more or less. The legislator will divide the citizens into 12 parts and arrange the rest of their property, as much as possible, into 12 equal parts, and there will be a registration of everything. After this, 12 lots will be assigned to 12 gods, named accordingly, and their respective portions will be dedicated to each god. The tribes will be named after them. The 12 divisions of the city will be distributed in the same way as the country, and each person will have 2 dwellings, one in the center of the country and the other at the edge. That is enough about the settlement process. Now we must consider that there can never be such a perfect alignment of circumstances as we have described. Not everyone will be willing to live in such a manner, to have their property limited, to have children according to our laws, and to give up gold and other things that the legislator will forbid. Not everyone will be able to tolerate the city being in the middle of the land with dwellings surrounding it. These objections are valid, and therefore everyone should consider what I am about to say. Once again, the legislator will appear and address us. My friends, he will say, I am not ignorant of the truth in your words. However, I believe that in matters that are not present but future, the one who sets an example of what they aim for should not fall short of the fairest and truest. If any part of this plan is impossible to execute, it should be avoided and not carried out. Instead, the legislator should find a way to implement what is closest and most similar to it. You must allow the legislator to perfect his design, and when it is perfected, you should join him in considering which parts of his legislation are expedient and which will face opposition. An artist who deserves any regard should always make their work self-consistent. Having determined that there will be a distribution into 12 parts, let us now see how this can be accomplished. It is not difficult to see that the 12 parts allow for the greatest number of divisions within them, as well as the other numbers that follow from them, up to 50-40. Therefore, the law should regulate clans, villages, and military ranks and movements, as well as coins, measures, dry and liquid, and weights, so that they are commensurable and agreeable to one another. We should not fear the appearance of detail if the law requires that all the vessels a person possesses have a common measure. When we consider that numbers have a use in all their variations, both as measures of height and depth and in all sounds and motions, whether straight or circular, we can see the importance of maintaining numerical order. The legislator should consider all these things and urge the citizens, as much as possible, not to disregard numerical order. For the study of arithmetic has a powerful effect on domestic and political affairs, as well as the arts. Above all, arithmetic awakens those who are naturally sluggish and dull, making them quick to learn, retentive, and shrewd. With the aid of divine art, they make progress beyond their natural abilities. If the legislator can eliminate meanness and covetousness from people's souls through other laws and institutions, so that they can use these tools properly and for their own good, then they will be excellent and suitable instruments of education. But if he cannot, he will unintentionally instill in them, instead of wisdom, the habit of deceit, which can be observed in the Egyptians and Phoenicians, as well as many other races, due to the common pursuit of dishonesty and material gain. This may be caused by an unworthy legislator or some chance or natural hindrance. We must not overlook, O Megillus and Cleinias, that different places produce different types of people, some better and others worse, and we must legislate accordingly. Some places are affected by strange and harmful influences, such as diverse winds and extreme heat, or by the nature of the water. Similarly, the quality of the food provided by the land not only affects the physical well-being of individuals, but also has an impact on their souls. Those places excel in these qualities where there is a divine inspiration and where the demigods have their designated roles, favoring rather than opposing the settlers. The legislator, if he possesses any wisdom, will take all these factors into account and shape his laws accordingly. Cleinias, you must pay attention to these matters and focus your mind on them, as you are about to establish a new colony.
Your words, Athenian stranger, are excellent, and I will do as you say.